going to probably be okay, Kevin. I think you probably said it in such a way that it would quit after I got started in a few minutes. We're in Mark chapter 4, and we stopped last week right at verse 20. I'll tell you something that you would know, some of you folks have been with us. We've had some fairly heavy subjects, 3.5 chapters in Mark so far. We've talked about the Sabbath day. We have talked about the unpardonable sin. We have talked about the doctrine of election so far. Tonight we're going to talk about women preachers, and we're going to talk about the tribulation, whether the rapture takes place before or after the tribulation, mid-tribulation, and we're going to talk about the age of the earth, whether it's 10,000 years or 4 billion. Actually, we're going to talk about none of those things. And if you see any of those things in Mark, you pretend you didn't see them, because I didn't see them, and we're not going to talk about them. So here we go. Charlie nailed that little bad boy. We are going to talk about fruit. And that's where we begin at a minimum. And so you recall last week, perhaps, that we ended with, there were 4 groups of folks that were described in a parable where there was a seed that was sown. And the 4th one was the one that all of us visualized we'd like to be in, or would find ourselves in, and that being the one that's in verse 20. So we're going to pick it up right there. I'll read that verse, and then we'll go on from there. And these are they which are sown on good ground, such as hear the word and receive it and bring forth fruit, some 30-fold, some 60, and some 100. Now, the verses that follow, which I think connect this concept or this subject of fruit to the points that Jesus is trying to make when he's teaching here, are some of the same verses that are used in other contexts. For example, some of them are used in the context of gifts, of when we're given gifts that we can use. Now, there's, as a matter of fact, when I read this verse and I read those verses, I'm thinking that's talking about gifts. But clearly the context, as Charlie mentioned, is fruit. Now, the difference is, and that's a distinction, with a big difference. A gift might be something that someone has been given, a spiritual gift, and with that gift or gifts, they may bear fruit or they may not. Probably all of us have known folks who are gifted. I mean, they just have a wonderful gift, and yet for some reason, they have not been particularly fruitful. Other people who have a gift, I think everybody has a spiritual gift, might not, that gift might not be one that everybody would be wanting or hoping, but those folks do bless you. That those folks do everything they can to bear fruit with the gift that they've been given. And so that's really what this is talking about. This is talking about bearing fruit. This is talking about what is done with what we have been given. In other words, we're talking about the product. We're talking about the end result of whatever the Lord has given us. That's the fruit that we're talking about in these next several verses here. There may be, again, some other applications to this, but clearly the context tells us we're talking about fruit. All right, here we go. So the next verse. Now, this is a perfect example. If he said unto them, is a candle brought to be put under a bushel or under a bed, and not to be on a candlestick? That's a rhetorical question. In other words, the answer is implied. In this case, the gift or what the object is a candle, and the fruit of the candle is, hello class, it's the light. It's the light that it puts out. So the fruit is intended to be used. The candle is intended to be used. The candle, hello class, is worthless if it's not lit when it's in darkness. I mean, you get nothing out of the candle. And we're not talking about the size of the candle. We're not talking about anything else. We're talking about what the candle does, and the candle bears fruit. And that's what believers are supposed to be doing, is whatever size their candle is, supposed to put that light out there on top of a candlestick, so that it does some good. So that's really where this is, and that's what that's talking about. All right. For there is nothing hid which shall not be manifest, neither shall anything be kept secret, but that it should come abroad. Now that verse, if you took that verse out of context, you might see it in a little different light. But I'm going to tell you something. It's talking about fruit. It needs to be talking about fruit. And here's what I think it's suggesting is that fruit will be manifest. When there's fruit being born, it will be shown. You're going to know when there's fruit. When somebody is producing fruit, when something is happening that's glorifying the Lord, you're going to have an opportunity to see it. It will be manifest. Okay, here we go. And here's these next verses are verses that we have had something like those in other places in Mark, and we talked about those. I think the first night it was, and of course some of these terms also appear in Revelation. But here's what it is. It says, verse 23: If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. We talked about that just a little bit earlier, but I have another translation which I think does a real good job with that verse, and here's what it says. Are you listening to this? I mean, are you really listening? Are you really listening? That's what that's saying. Are you paying attention? So these words, if you've got a red letter Bible, are in red. So you know what? Anything that's in the book, it seems to me like anything that's in the book that's to us, we should be listening, we should be paying attention. But I'm sorry, it seems to me like, hello class, when Jesus says, pay attention, are you listening? I mean, are you really listening? Probably time to listen. All right, here we go. And he said unto them, Jesus said unto them, take heed what you hear. Pay attention to what you're listening to. Pay attention to what you hear. With what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you, and unto you that hear shall be given, shall more be given. So this verse, of course, is also used in a different context, where we're talking about what you give, and it shall be given you. That the concept of actually us giving in that sense there. This is really what it's talking about here in this context of fruit. Now there may be other applications as well, but in the context of fruit, here's what it suggests to me: that a person who bears fruit has the opportunity to bear even more. That the very act of bearing fruit, that the very act of producing, that the very act of doing what we were intended to do, but the very act of using the gift that we were given to bear fruit will enable us to bear even more fruit. That's how that works. If you're productive, if you're doing what the Lord intends for you to do, then you have the opportunity to do even more. Some of you may be concerned about the 30, 60, 100. Well, I'm going to tell you something. I don't know where you fit on that scale, or if there's some other number. Those numbers, of course, are just to say that some produce more fruit than others. But if in your heart of hearts you'd like to produce more fruit, the way to do that is to produce fruit with what you've got. That's what that's saying. If you want to do more, if you want to be more productive, if you want to see more results from your efforts, then you need to do the very best you've got with what you've got, and the Lord will give you more fruit. That's what that says. That's what it says. All right. I'm not suggesting there's not some kind of an overlap between this and gifts, but in this context, I'm sure this is talking about fruit, which is where we began this conversation. Now, there's a new parable coming up. This also talks about fruit, but he begins a new parable. So before I go, does anybody like to trot out a thought on what we've just talked about? I mean, this is what this is, and that's the difference between fruit and gifts. It seems to me is what we do with what we've been given. All right. Okay. Here we go. And he said, here we go. Jesus said, so is the kingdom of God, if a man should cast seed into the ground. Now, this is another parable, and he's trying to explain something about the kingdom of God. This is the first of two parables where he talks about the kingdom of God. One of the things that the preacher pointed out when he was suggesting what we may be talking about tonight was that there's some discussion or conversation about the kingdom of God. And the first one is it's compared to a seed, and here's what he said. And hello, we need to get who he's talking about. And this is Jesus, and he said, so is the kingdom of God, as if a man should cast a seed into the ground. I'm giving you an example, he said here. And should sleep. That's talking about the man. And rise night and day, and the seed should spring up, and he, that's the man who sowed it, knoweth not how. So here's what happens. Same concept. He's talking about fruit, which we pick up in the next verse. He's talking about fruit. So here's what happens: the man, the sower, the person who's planting a seed, puts it out there. He plants the seed, and the seed begins to grow, and he doesn't quite understand. Hello, when it begins to grow, that's out of his hands. Now, I know there's some things that we can do to cultivate and to water and to fertilize, whatever like that. But the fact of the matter is, we don't make those things grow. He doesn't know how. And I'm going to tell you something. It's not our responsibility. It's not our responsibility to understand why the fruit does more than the fruit does. That's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to plant the seed and produce some fruit. That's what our responsibility is to do. The Lord, hello class, will give the increase. The Lord will determine how it's best used and under what circumstances that fruit might be best be a blessing to someone. The Lord knows. The person who sows it doesn't understand all that. Don't have to understand all that. It's not our place. Our place is to do what we're supposed to do, and the Lord will take care of it. Aren't you glad? Hello, class. Aren't you glad that the Lord will take care of it? Because He does. Absolutely, He does. So we've got this analogy, a comparison to the kingdom of God. For the earth bringeth forth fruit of herself, first the blade, then the ear, and after that the full corn, and after that the full corn in the ear. So the person who plants this plants it, and the fruit comes forth. The fruit comes forth. It just does. The Lord brings forth the fruit from the effort put forth by the planter, by the sower in this case. That's where that comes from. But when the fruit is brought forth, immediately now we're going to talk about that he. We have a couple other places in here in these verses that are in front of us where the pronoun, and the he, the them, the they, it's a little difficult sometimes to know who that's exactly talking about. So I have a view on where this is, and I had some conversation about it earlier, and there's another view of all things, other than mine. It just happens sometimes. But we need to figure out who this he is. But whatever the case, this is what the verse says. And when the fruit is brought forth, immediately he putteth in the sickle, because the harvest is come. Now, who's the he? Well, you know what? Let's go back and look at the verses just in front of it. And he, this is Jesus here, said, so is the kingdom of God, as if a man should cast seed into the ground. In the next verse, when it says, and should sleep and arise night and day, and the seed shall spring and grow it up, he knoweth not how. That's certainly referring to the man. That's the man who does the sowing. And in my view, that's exactly the man that's talking about it here. So here's what happens. The seed is sown. The Lord gives the increase. The Lord produces the fruit. It's not the production of that is the Lord's responsibility, and He handles that. And then the man gets benefit. The person who sows it gets some benefit from the fruit that was sown, in addition to others as well. Of course, this doesn't say that he eats all the corn, or in this case, that's what it's talking about, that he's only a consumer of the fruit. It's not the only one that consumes it, but the person who sowed it gets some benefit from the fruit as well. That clearly seems like that's what it means to me. There's some other possibility, I suppose, that it is God or it's Jesus who cuts that down, and I don't quite see that. Besides that, it's not talking here about, now this is talking about fruit only. We're not talking now about those that are cut down and cast into the fire, which comes up in John 15. So it's not talking about that. This is the fruit. So the fruit is harvested. That's really what it means. The fruit becomes ripe and it is harvested. That's what that's talking about. Pretty sure of that. So let's just get this whole parable. This is the kingdom of God, something like this. A person sows. From that act, a result is generated. The person who sowed it doesn't always understand that. They're not always they don't always see how or why that something good's going to come out of that. But it does. And when the fruit becomes full, in other words, when the fruit is ready to be consumed, when the fruit is ready to be a blessing to others, then that fruit is dispensed, or that fruit is harvested. That's really the word I'm looking for. The fruit is harvested so that people can have benefit from the fruit that was generated. And that's the analogy to the kingdom of God. It may be a little confusing, but we look at those verses. I'm pretty sure that's what they say. Now, if anybody has another view on that, I'm happy to hear it. But it's talking about that. It seems to me clearly here. This is the analogy to the kingdom of God. And that is, there's a sowing, there's a growing, and there's a reaping. We have a responsibility. The Lord gives the increase. Others get the benefit from the increase. Others get the benefit from the fruit. And so does the person who sowed it. Anyone on it? Okay, last week I managed to get about, 3 or 4 words out, and then I had some... lots of thoughts, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay without thoughts, particularly when the thoughts don't agree with me. I don't really deal well with those. No, I'm fine. Okay, here we go. So there's another parable. Begins in verse 30. And he said, this is Jesus, whereunto shall we liken the kingdom of God? Here's another one. Or with what comparison shall we compare? So again, he's trying to explain what's the kingdom of God. Again, he's trying to explain... he's trying to give an analogy. He's giving a parable about the kingdom of God. And so it's like It's like a grain of mustard seed. One more time. This is a comparison to, we know, a grain of mustard seed. Where else does that come up besides here? It had something this as a mustard seed. So you can say that mountain remove hence, and the mountain shall remove. What is it? Faith. Hello, that's right. Faith. So that's as if you have faith as a mustard seed, and that's really not what this is not just really dealing with that. Here it says, we're in verse 31, preacher, getting the second comparison to the kingdom of God, the analogy of the kingdom of God. It's like a grain of mustard seed, which when it is sown, so this one here is when this little tiny itty-bitty seed is sown in the earth, is less than all seeds that be in the earth. Now, it's the littlest seed you can imagine. You cannot imagine that something positive or something big could come out of that little seed. That's really what that's saying. It's a little tiny seed. Hello, the kingdom of God, please get this, is like a little tiny seed that when it's planted in the ground, it's smaller than anything that you might expect, but when it is sown, verse 32, it groweth up and becomes greater than all the herbs, and shooteth out great branches, so that the fowls of the air may lodge under the shadow of it. Now let me just ask you this. And the answer to this question is either yes or no, please. If somebody comes specifically to your mind, hold that thought. But hold the name. But let me ask you: have you ever known anyone? Maybe you. Have you ever known a time when someone did something, when someone produced some fruit, when somebody did something, and it seemed like such a small thing at the time, and something overwhelmingly wonderful came out of it? Anybody ever know of a circumstance like that, when someone did something that was my nobody has ever seen anything? Okay, thank you. I got a couple. I'll take some bids. Anyone else want to get in the? Well, I'm sorry, I've even got some nods now. But the fact of the matter is, I'm going to give you an example. Are you ready for an example? Don't say you're ready if you're not ready, Kevin. You say you're ready sometimes. You're not ready, buddy. So let me just ask you this. This is another yes or no. This is another yes or no. Does the name Edward Kimball ring a bell to anyone? I don't want you to tell me how it rings a bell to you, but preacher, you know who Edward? He thinks he knows. What does he know? Okay, here we go. I don't do this very often. I'm going to read a couple paragraphs. There are many people who could tell you the historical significance of Edward Kimball. In 1854, BW, remember, Kimball was a Sunday school teacher in Detroit. And one day he went to visit a 17-year-old boy who was in his Sunday school class who had little interest in God or religion. During his visit with the young man at his job in a shoe shop, he led the boy to a relationship with Christ. That young man was?
Moody.
Dwight L. Moody, a Sunday school teacher. This kid had no interest whatsoever. Dwight L. Moody. He went on to become one of the greatest evangelists in the world, sharing the gospel with 100 million people, as well as founding Moody Bible Institute and the Moody Church in Chicago. Instead, there are no TVs. He still managed to get to 100 million people. But the story doesn't end there. Through his ministry, Moody was responsible for a London pastor named F.B. Meyer coming to faith. Meyer was responsible for J. Wilbur Chapman coming to faith, and Chapman influenced, Billy Sunday, another prominent evangelist of the 20th century. Billy Sunday was integral in a man named Mordecai Ham coming to faith, and Mordecai Ham was the preacher responsible for leading a young man named Billy Graham. Billy Graham to Christ. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Sometimes, this is the way the kingdom of God is. Something that may seem so small and so insignificant, all of a sudden becomes great. Great. This is where we get this analogy here. It becomes greater than all herbs, shooteth out great branches, the fowls of the air may lodge under the shadow of it. I want to just tell you something. I don't know. Edward Kimball. I don't know. All I know is that little seed that he planted bore much fruit. It bore much fruit, and you know what? We may decide that the things that we do, the interactions we have, or the Sunday school teacher, or the bus, or whatever, what could possibly come out of that. But I want the Lord knows. The Lord knows. And the Lord gives the increase. And the kingdom of God is just like that. The kingdom of God is just like that. It's people doing the things that they should do, and just planting the seed, and He gives the increase. And who can say? I don't know, and I don't know how any of us could guess. Although I suppose someday we may know how many people came to know the Lord. How many people will be crowded into heaven? Not crowded, but in heaven, Edward Kimball. That's I'm sorry. A little seed can become something big. All right, that's the kingdom of God is like that. That's fruit. Anyone?
Do your very best and leave the results to God.
Uncle Tom says, do your very best and leave the results to God. We do what we're supposed to do, and exactly so that then the Lord will give the. That's the way the kingdom of God works. That's what that's about. All right, here we go. Verse 33. And with many parables spake he the word unto them, he that would be Jesus, and as they were able to hear it. But without a parable spake he not unto them, and when they were alone, he expounded all things to his disciples. And so there's other gospels which talk about that. The primary, in fact, it says that's really the way he taught, and that's really what he did. The primary vehicle Jesus used was parables to teach, and it says here that when they were alone, or when they were off to where they were together, he spent that time with the disciples, and he taught them all those things. I don't know what he taught them. It would have been something to be one of the 12, would it not? Wouldn't it have been something to be the one where Jesus was explaining those things? I don't know that everything he explained to them, that we have it in the book. I don't know that it's there. Here's what I do know. I know this for sure. Whatever we need is in the book. It's in the book. If we needed it, it would be here. We might like more. I would, frankly. I'm curious about several things. But let me just tell you this: he explained everything to them. He taught in parables, and when they were alone, he explained everything to them. But whatever we need to get, whatever what helps us get where we're supposed to be, whatever we're responsible for knowing, it's in the book. It's there. So we of course we have that, and they didn't, don't we? So whatever the case, it's. That was his method of teaching, and that's how he dealt with those things. Okay, here we go. Now, the preacher also talked about this, and I'm on I'm on verse 35. I'm on verse 35. And the same day when the even was come, he saith unto them, let's pass over to the other side. This is talking about, of course, the Sea of Galilee. Now, has anybody ever seen or stood on the shore of the Sea of Galilee? Well, I think if you did, you would be impressed with a couple things. Number one of it is its size. I would tell you, I was just so surprised at how small it is, really. It's 69.09 square miles. At the longest place, it's 13 miles. At the widest place, it's 8 miles. People swim it, length and width. Yeah, they do. We have a lake. They have a lake in Florida, Lake Okeechobee. Anybody ever see Lake Okeechobee? 730 square miles. So it's over 10 times the size of that of the Sea of Galilee. Lake Chickamauga, for gosh sakes. That's what I said. It's 57 square miles or whatever. So it's just a little bit less than the Sea of Galilee. It really is. It just surprises me. And one of the things that shocks me is, I just look at it, is that it could actually get a storm like it's about to be described here. I mean, it just doesn't seem like it would happen. But as I understand it, well, hello, class, it did happen. It did happen. There was a storm like that, and there still are. There's the way the mountains are, there's valleys, and I guess the wind comes down through there, and it hits that water, and it just turns it up. Whatever the case, you would think it wouldn't be as boisterous as it clearly was, but this has happened on more than one occasion, as we read in here, and this is one of those occasions. So here's what happened. The same day when the even come, this is evening time, he saith unto them, this is Jesus now talking to his disciples, as we got those pronouns, let us pass over to the other side. And when they had sent the multitude away, they took him even as he was in the ship. They, the disciples, took him, Jesus, even as he was in the ship. There were also with him other little ships. All right. And there rose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship so that it's now full. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it sounds to me like water is inside the boat. I mean, that's what it sure sounds like that to me. Water is inside the ship, and I don't know, at some point, that becomes an issue. I mean, I think the ship's supposed to be in the water, but generally speaking, the water's supposed to be outside the boat. But this clearly says there was water in the boat. And these guys got upset about it, and there arose a great storm, and the waves beat on the ship so that it was now full. And Jesus, was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And they, the disciples, awake him, Jesus, and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he, Jesus, arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was great calm. And he, Jesus, said unto them, the disciples, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? Well, I would tell you this, I try to picture me in that circumstance, not how you would be, but I would be exercised of spirit. I might even be upset. I'm sorry, the water's in the boat, the wind is high, it's boisterous. I guess, we're going to die. We're going to die. I guess I think that. But he was hard on them. Of course, they had seen him do some totally wonderful and miraculous things, but I don't think they'd ever seen him do anything quite like this. As a matter of fact, the next verses suggest that they hadn't. This was a new experience for them, what they saw. But he was hard on them. He just said, what's your problem? Don't you have faith? And then he speaks to the wind and the waves, and they were settled. They stopped. And they, the disciples, feared exceedingly and said one to another, What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Now, one of the things that we had talked about earlier, and as I recall, I actually recall who mentioned it, was Harry, about the fact that the demons obeyed Jesus, but the people didn't, and how that was an interesting thought. Well, I have heard others mention that the demons obeyed him, and the wind and the seas obeyed him too, did they not? So the wind and the seas obeyed him, but the people, in some cases, still today, do not. The answer to that, we discussed briefly, but it seemed like another good time to mention it. Of course, the wind and the seas and the demons have no choice. They got no choice. They do what they're told. People, on the other hand, have a choice. We have a choice. The folks that are recorded in the book of Mark, they had a choice. Some of them did what he said, and some of them did something other than what he said, and they'd be no different than the people that we come across every single day, including some that we might see in the mirror occasionally, and that being those that we have a choice. And it's a blessed thing to have a choice, but it would also be nice if we made a good choice. Whatever the case, the winds and the sea obeyed him. That must have been really something. I try to put myself sometimes in these spots, and you see all these waves, and think you're going to go down. You figure this is it. We're going to die, and he speaks, and it becomes calm. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something to see? A lot of his miracles would be miraculous and really be something, but this is clearly one of them. It's just like, whoa. No wonder they were taken back by that. So that's the Sea of Galilee, and they're coming back to the other side. Now, one of the things that I had mentioned was that earlier on that some of the text that we find in Mark lends itself to some of the discussion like we had on those subjects I mentioned earlier this evening, and some of them where it talks about this is what happened, and it goes from it's what happened here. In other words, it's just this happened and this happened and this happened, and this is what happened here. So those verses I think tend to go a little more quickly, and even though the preacher tends to be critical about how long I take, I think that we're ready, I think, to move into chapter 5 unless somebody else has a point that you'd like to talk about on chapter 4. Anyone? All right. So the preacher said he thought he asked if we might get here, and apparently we are. And this is talking, of course, about when Jesus healed the Gadarene demonic. This man from, incidentally, you would know, or I presume you would know, from some of the things surrounding this story that where they went next was primarily Gentiles. There's mostly Gentiles lived here. We don't know whether this man was a Gentile or not, which is discussed, but the first 20 verses of chapter 5 all talk about this demonic Gadarene, this guy. So let's tee it up. And they, that being Jesus and his disciples, came over to the other side into the country of the Gadarenes. And when he was come out of the ship, he, Jesus, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling, this is talking about the man with the unclean spirit, among the tombs. No man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces. Neither could any man tame him. And always night and day he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. This man, for those of you who are taking notes, was in a fix. He had a problem. He had a problem. But when he, this is the man, saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshiped him. He ran and worshiped Jesus. And cried with a loud voice and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. Now, this is what came out of his mouth. Out of the man's mouth. These words came out of his mouth. Now, another way that this might be characterized now, instead of saying, what have I to do with thee, is what are you going to do with me? It might have been reversed in the vernacular which we use and said, Jesus, what have you got to do to me? What are you going to do to me? Because of the demons that possessed him, of course they testified as to, and they knew who he was, and that's where the thou Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of God, that's where that came out of. The Jesus, the Son of the Most High God, I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. For he, that's Jesus, said unto him, that's the man with the demons, come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. So Jesus said to the man, come out of him, come out, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, this is Jesus, asked the man with the unclean spirit, what is thy name? And he, the man with the unclean spirit, answered, saying, my name is Legion, for we are many. My name is Legion. Now, the Roman legion, the largest group of soldiers, would be somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000. We don't know how many there were. We have a reason to suppose there were a lot. Well, he said there was. My name is Legion because we are many. So within this poor man were demons, hundreds, perhaps thousands. Demons in this man. No wonder he was in the fix that he was. Now, let me just tell you this. People get in fixes. People get in all sorts of fixes where there's really only one solution, and that is Jesus, the Son of God. There really is only one. It doesn't have to be this bad in order to be bad. I mean, there are some folks who have some serious problems, and there's really only one solution, the same as the one that he identified, and of course there was Jesus. So I want us to look carefully for a few moments at the interaction between Jesus and these demons. Generally speaking, it's characterized in the singular sense, but we do know that there was a bunch of them. All right. My name is Legion, for we are many. Verse 9, 10, and he besought him much that he would not send them. Now here we go. And he besought him. So this is the man. This is the man with the unclean spirits. Besought Jesus much that he, Jesus, would not send them, that's the demons, away out of the country. Now, when I read this, I try to figure out if there's something in that verse that maybe I hadn't seen before, or if there's something in there that might be an opportunity to make a point. Look at the last of that verse, please, with me or for me, please. Here's what they said. These demons knew that they were going to be out of the guy. They knew that where they currently were was going to be history. That was going to be a prior residence. And they said to him, "Don't send us where? Out of the country. Don't send us out of the country." Another translation says, "Don't send us to a faraway place." Now, I have notes in margins and commentators who say this is talking about, they're talking about the pit, or they don't want to go down to the pit. I'm sorry, that is someone's opinion, certainly, but that's not what it says here. Here's what they said: don't send us out of the country. Whatever you do, don't send us out of the country. Now, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what, if anything, in particular that means, but what it suggests to me is that there was something about that country where they felt more welcome than they might somewhere else. I mean, that's clearly what it suggests. Whatever you do, don't send us out of the country. That's what it says. Now, when you think that, assuming that that's at least part of what it means, what it could mean, one might wonder, are there locations, geographic locations, where demons could feel more welcome than some other places? Some place may come to mind. It does to me. Sodom and Gomorrah surely would, sure. But there would be some places where maybe that are around today even, where a demon might feel more. But here's what happened. They saw the pigs. Get this, please. The demons saw the pigs, and the demons suggested the pigs. Clearly, whatever else this might mean, they preferred to go into pigs. I don't know what they're going to do with a pig. I mean, what's a demon going to do with a pig? Make it a bad pig? Hello? I mean, why would that be a worthwhile place to go? But they said they would rather go into pigs than be sent out of the country. That's what it says. So whatever it was, they did not want to leave the area. They wanted to stay close to home. That's what it was. And I have to tell you, I can surely visualize circumstances under which there would be some area, for whatever reason, where a demon or demons might feel more comfortable or more welcome, that's a better way of saying it, than other places. Whatever the case, don't send us out of the country. So here's what he did. That it was nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding, and the devils besought him, that's the devils besought Jesus, saying, send us into the swine that we may enter into them. You know, the only thing that says is they would rather be in pigs than leave the country. And I don't know that demons would ordinarily possess pigs. I don't know. I've had a few that I thought might have been possessed. But whatever. They said we'd rather go into the pigs. And so Jesus, and forthwith Jesus gave them leave, gave the demons leave. And the unclean spirits went out, entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea. There were about 2,000 and were choked in the sea. Now, of course, they drowned. I have no idea what the demons thought they were going to do. Rather the demons anticipated that if they were put in those pigs, that they would run down the hill and into the sea and drown. I don't know. And I have to tell you this, you may wonder what happened to the demons then. I don't know the answer to that either. I don't know if demons drown. I don't think they probably do. What did they do after that? I don't know. I know what they didn't do. They didn't go back into that same guy. I know that. They did not go back where they came from. No, Jesus got them out of that boy, and they were gone. But whatever the case, these 2,000 pigs run down the hill. That must have been a sight. Into the sea and drowned. Okay. And they that fed the swine fled, told in the city and in the country, and they went out to see, this is now the people from the city and the country, went out to see what it was that was done. And they, that would be the people from the city and the country, come to Jesus and see him that was possessed of the devil and had the legion sitting clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. So what happened was the people from the town, they hear about this, they hear what happened, this guy's demons cast out, and so they come out to see it. And sure enough, they see Jesus, and they see this guy who was a wild man, and obviously everybody had known it. You can't read this text, this portion of the text, without recognizing that was a well-known fact. People knew this guy was impossible. You couldn't chain him. You couldn't put him in fetters or whatever of some kind. You could not control him. He was uncontrollable. And there he was, sitting, clothed in his right mind, and there was Jesus. And so, but there were no pigs. Okay, and they that saw it told them how it befell him. So these are the people that were present when it happened now, told the people from the city and the town how it happened, how it befell to him that was possessed of the devil, and also concerning the swine. Now, I don't know what those pigs were worth. But yesterday, I didn't check today, but yesterday I checked the markets, and because I just felt like it's a thing to do. And feeder pigs, depending on the size, I get that. Trust me, I get that. Feeder pigs begin at $100, and breeders go from $300 to $1,000, and presumably there was some of that latter group among those pigs because there were 2,000, right? So I don't know what the pigs were worth. But if the pigs were worth $250, it's $500,000. That's $500,000. That's not chump change. You know, those people, somebody was out a lot. But somebody was sitting clothed in his right mind. Somebody was sitting clothed in his right mind. I hope that if there was something that happened that cost me, I hope, a lot, but someone who had been out of their mind, someone who had been lost, was found, clothed, and in their right mind, I hope I'd be glad for them. I hope I'd be glad for them. But of course they weren't, were they? No, they weren't. So they began to pray him, it says in verse 17, to depart out of their coasts. They put prophets over people, which is something that people do today. And you know, and I will tell you something. Of all the things about which you know, I hope never could be said of me. I hope that nobody would ever be able to say of me that I thought money was more important than people, because it's not. It's just not. Whatever the case, they asked him, they prayed. It says here they began to pray him to leave. Other translations say they said, "Get out of here." They squeezed on him. You get out of here, please. These were Gentiles. And well, hello, the pigs, Gentiles. You betcha. So it's primarily Gentiles. There may be some Jews, but they said, you know, leave. And so, you know, he left, didn't he? And when he was come into the ship, Jesus, he that had been possessed of the devil, we know who that is, prayed him, Jesus, that he might be with him. So the guy who had the demons cast out of him said to Jesus, I want to go with you. I want to go. I want to go. I guess we understand that, don't we? The first sane thought he'd had, and ever how long it was, the first sane moments he had, and ever how it was, there he was, and the worst person who brought it to him is leaving. He wants to go with him. Howbeit, this is interesting to me, and I hope it is to you. Howbeit, Jesus suffered him not, but saith unto him, Go home to thy friends and tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee, and hath had compassion on thee. Now, here we go. We know that Jesus had done several miracles along the way. We got some more coming up. The preacher mentioned one. There's actually 2 healings that take place in the remainder of this chapter, which we will get to, Lord willing, in 2 weeks, missions next week. 2 healings, and he treated those differently. But among the things that he had said to people before was to keep it quiet. Don't talk about it. But he told this guy, go talk about it. Go talk about it. I want you to go be a testimony. Go tell them what happened to you. Go tell them. Anybody have any idea why this guy was different? I'm not sure either. But the instruction was different. The instruction was, you go tell, I don't want you to come with me, I want you to go. So he went into the area like 10 cities, Decapolis, whatever, which is, of course, suggests 10 different communities. And he did. This guy did exactly what he was told. He began to publish in Decapolis how great things Jesus done for him, and all men did marvel. Well, you know, it's possible, you know, why he told him to do this, I'm not sure. But among the reasons may have been that all these people knew what he was like. I mean, this guy was a walking testimony. Everywhere he went with clothes on, for God's sakes, having a conversation with people, this guy is a testimony. Just because he was clean. And that, you know, maybe because he was so well known and it was so obvious something wonderful, miraculous had happened to him, that could be easily the reason that he was chosen to. I mean, he was one selected to go tell. There are other times when Jesus said, "Don't tell," and of course we got one of those next week, and we have another one that's different. So we have some healing. 2 weeks from now we have some healings, and we're out of time. So, preacher, you weren't here when I told the folks there's going to be some other conversations. Why don't you start with women in the pastorate? If you just go ahead and explain people that one, and then you can get to the tribulation and the age of the earth another time. Maybe, I don't know. These are small things that I know you'd like to explain rather than I. But why don't you dismiss us in prayer, preacher? And you've got it.